On today's show, what does it look like if the Houston Rockets overachieve, underachieve, or meet expectations this season? It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, just $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Here because today we're going to be talking about what would happen for the Houston Rockets if they overachieve this season. What does it look like if they underachieve? And what does it look like if they hit their expected outcome this year? We're going to talk about all three of those and the different things that would have to go into these, I guess, three different versions of this team this season, Madison.
Yeah, man, I think this is a very exciting episode for me because we really get to dive into these young players and what they look like and how that translates on the court into wins and what we could realistically expect from this team in different angles, like what we expect and what we realistically think, a very successful team looks like. It's very exciting for me.
Absolutely. So what we're going to start with right here is kind of the best case outcome, or if the Rockets kind of overachieve their expectations coming this season. So what we're using as our baseline, the Rockets are currently predicted, or the over-under win totals for the Rockets via FanDuel Sportsbook is currently set at 43.5 wins this season. So again, going past 43.5 would be overachieving their win totals. Going under would be obviously underachieving. So we're going to set that number at 44 as kind of the expected average. So using that number as kind of our barometer, our baseline, if this team overachieves, let's say they rack up an extra, anywhere from 5 to 6 wins past that expected outcome of 44, that puts them at 49 or possibly 50 wins, which when you look at last season's Western Conference standings, would have been good enough to be in the race for the 5th or 6th seed. The Phoenix Suns were the locked-in 6th seed, that final slot in the playoff race, and that means guaranteed home court advantage. Not home court advantage, guaranteed playoff spot where you don't have to worry about the play-in tournament shenanigans, any of that. And, starting with that as kind of our baseline for what an overachieving season would look like. I mean, first off, I'd be ecstatic if the Rockets could guarantee themselves a playoff spot. But what are some of the things that we think, Madison, would have to happen for this Rockets team to meet that outcome, to overachieve and reach that goal?
And I think this is important because what we know about the teams, all the teams that were the 6th seed and up, is they all had probably a top 10 player in this league, right? They all had a superstar player leading the charge, a guy who is a franchise player that you can build your entire team around. And not the fact that they just had one of those top 10 to 15 players, but they typically had another top 20 to 25 player on that team. And so to me, that one of our young guys, actually two of our young guys would have to have taken a pretty large leap in order for us to reach that outcome. And I think we have several candidates that makes this realistic, that we can actually get there. And I think that's the hope of this season, is that we finally get these guys who reach these franchise cornerstone levels where we know who we're going to pay. We know who we're going to spend our money on. And I think Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Amon Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr. are all set up perfectly to make those type of leaps. So 2 of those players will have to enter the top 20, in the league, and possibly one top 10.
Yeah, I think when you start looking at it, I think it's a fantastic point, right? All those teams did have star level or multiple star level players. So if the Rockets do take that jump, there's one guy already that looks like he is, at least borderline all-star level right now. Didn't get the votes for it, obviously, but played at an all-star level. That's Alperen Sengun. So assuming he's able to at least come back and play even he plays the exact same level that he played last season, that's another all-star caliber season under his belt. It would take one more player, it feels like, and the guy in the best position to take that leap. We talked about this recently, but it's got to be Jalen Green, right? But you make a great point. The Rockets have so many other young guys that could all evolve and take a massive step forward this season. Maybe it is Jabari Smith Jr. Maybe it's Amen Thompson. Maybe he excels, and Ime's already hyping up how he looks physically different, this offseason. Maybe he comes back and maybe he fights hard and eventually earns a starting spot in the roster or in the starting lineup if they ultimately do something with Dillon Brooks. I love that, and I think that is definitely going to be an important recipe for that level of success this season. Is Sengun needs somebody else on his level, right?
Yeah,
Last year, in a lot of the games the Rockets won, it was because, okay, Sengun's doing his job, he's putting in the work, and then somebody else stepped up with him, right? It was maybe it was Fred VanVleet one night, or Dillon Brooks one night, or Jalen Green one night, but the Rockets didn't have a consistent second best player last season. It was kind of a rotating, carousel or whatever of different guys stepping up on each different night. For the Rockets to take that next leap, they need two guys that are going to consistently produce at all-star levels. And then to be at that level, that's when you get those third complementary guys where then, okay, if Sengun and Jalen are both producing at an all-star level on a nightly basis, then you can have the Fred VanVleets and the Dillon Brooks and the Jabari Smith Jr.'s and the Tari Easons, and they can all occasionally have one of their own monster games. And then if you've got three guys all popping off pretty much every game consistently, then you're going to be one of the better teams in the conference. The other thing that I think to me is going to be so important for this team to reach that type of an outcome is going to be the offense. They have to figure out they proved that they can be a great defensive team last season. They finished the year as a top 10 defense. They were flirting with being a top 5 defense for a good chunk of the season before things kind of regressed a little bit post All-Star break. I think guys were dealing with some nagging injuries, and there was definitely that tail end stretch of the season where once they were eliminated, like guys just weren't fighting as hard for things, and they kind of mailed it in a little bit, to round out the season. So you take those last month or so with a grain of salt, maybe, but to me, they need to at least be around middle of the pack offensively. If they can be a top 10 defense again this year and at least 15th or better offensively, that is a team that is definitely going to be fighting for a guaranteed playoff spot, not even just a play-in spot.
No, I definitely agree. And I think one of the things that would allow them to get there offensively and also defensively, right, or reach this without having a superstar player on the team is if they cohesively use play as one cohesive unit and also utilize their depth. So not only are they competitive with the starters minutes, but they also are just beating teams up with the bench minutes because of this great depth that we have. If these guys decide to play together as one unit and MA implements an offense that really is egalitarian, that works for all, then we may see something arise similar to the Budenholzer Hawks, where you have no real superstar on the team, but the pieces just fit so perfectly and seamlessly, and these guys know how to play so well with one another that you overwhelm teams with the consistency of how good you are. Now, I think that is a stretch. I think we have the coach to get us there, and I think we have some good vets to get us started. But I do think that is a stretch because these are very young players, and consistency is the name of the game. It is more likely that we get these two guys that are Alperen Sengun level or above, or three guys in that vein via a la OKC Thunder, right? Three guys via that way where we really have a fulcrum of how we run our offense, and teams are not able to overload on any one guy because we have the ultimate release valves that can really help. And that's what we saw last season really mess the Rockets up when Alperen Sengun was going on a tear and teams switched their entire defenses to stop him. There was nobody really good enough to make plays two on one or 3-on-2, right? There was no other star to create on the opposite side. And when Jalen began to go on his tear, we saw the same thing that slowed him down, where teams began to trap him at the top of the key, and he didn't have the ultimate release valve in Alperen Sengun to make plays for others and really create a shot out of those advantages. So yes, the key has to be to get a second star next to Alperen Sengun.
Going back to the numbers for a split second before we move on to our next segment, looking at the net rating numbers last season for the NBA regular season, all 6 of the teams, or I should say 5 of the 6 teams that were in the top part of the Western Conference bracket, standings-wise, were all in the top 10 for net rating across the association. Can you guess the one team that wasn't in the top 10 but finished top 6 in the West, Madison? Take a stab at it.
I get 2 guesses or just one?
You get one guess, man. Come on. We wrapping up the segment.
Oh, my God. Phoenix.
No, actually. It was surprisingly, it was Dallas.
It was Phoenix and Dallas. I knew it was.
Dallas was 15th in net rating. And now a big part of that is because Dallas had a massive surge. They struggled in the beginning, and they really found themselves after the PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford trades, all that. But I say that, I bring that up to highlight. The Rockets last year were 18th in net rating. They were a plus 0.9 in their net rating column. So that number has to improve, and the only way that number is going to improve if they move the offense forward. They've proved they can be a good defensive team. They got to figure out the offense moving forward. But we want to know, what else do you think needs to go right for the Houston Rockets next season to overachieve? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Coming up, what happens if the Houston Rockets underachieve? What happens if it's the worst case outcome and they perform worse this next season? We're going to talk about that here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of Sunday, September 15th, pregame moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, September 12th. View your account page now to learn more about your boost. And while you're there over at FanDuel, look, we're talking about win totals here. If you feel confident after segment 1, go to the Rockets win total, throw down some money, smash the over, right? They're hitting 50 wins. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison, we're going to just, I can't say it's like spoonful of medicine to, or spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down kind of thing. It's not even, I don't even have the proper analogy for what we got to talk about here. I don't even want to, it sucks because like we're doing this because we're doing a 3-part show. We're talking about all the outcomes. I don't even want to like entertain the idea of the Rockets regressing or somehow playing worse this next season because it's just depressing to talk about. But this is the reality of the situation is sometimes we see teams regress. Sometimes things are all set up for, the team to move forward and, experience new highs and keep progressing. And then sometimes bad things happen. Now I will say, I'm gonna say this from the top. The easiest cop out when you do these kinds of shows or talk about these types of topics is you say, oh, well, if somebody gets injured, no injuries. We don't get to talk about injuries. That doesn't count. We're not going to say, oh my God, if half the roster gets injured, then yeah, they're going to underperform. No, that's a cop out. So let's start with, what do you think, what would need to happen if this team underachieves, right? So they won 41 games last season. We said at the beginning, our barometer for this is 44 wins. So we went about 5 or 6 wins up for them to get to 49-50. So let's say 5 or 6 wins below. So let's say they clocked in at 39, 38 wins, somewhere around there. I think that would be a massive disappointment given the miraculous improvement that they had last season, 19 wins from 22 to 41. If they somehow finish with less than 41 wins, if they're in that 38, 39 bracket, even if the West is a bloodbath, I think that would have to be viewed as an absolutely disappointing season. And I don't even know, that's probably not even enough to keep you in the play-in conversation, honestly.
Yeah, it's probably not in the loaded West. And I think there's a real simple answer to this, though, that I think is very realistic for these young Rockets. And it's actually the answer about why we underperformed our plus minus our net rating last year. It's something that you recently talked about on Locked On Rockets. And that's if these guys do not execute in crunch time, if they drop too many of their close games because they're too young and they're not poised enough to win in those clutch time minutes. They can play these amazing games or stay in the game and be competitive, but if you cannot close games, which the Rockets were plagued with all last year, with missed free throws, with untimely turnovers, if this team is not poised, if they do not take care of the ball when things slow down in playoff environments, they will drop a lot of games that they should win. And that is one of the ways I think you can come in five or six games under what you expect to win and how you underperform your net rating.
Yeah, I mean, for those who, if you missed our episode where we did talk about those numbers this past season in the clutch, the Houston Rockets went 17-23. So 17 wins, 23 losses. Again, playing in the clutch means a game that is within 5 points within the final 5 minutes. So either way, plus or minus 5 points in the final 5 minutes of the game. That was good for almost bottom 5 in the NBA last season, Madison. The Rockets were 25th in the NBA in their clutch time win percentage. The only teams behind them were the Memphis Grizzlies, who were decimated by injuries, the Toronto Raptors, the San Antonio Spurs, the Wizards, and the Pistons. That is not great company. If you want to be a team to move forward and move the needle forward and try and get to the next level of your evolution phase. I don't know what phase we're in for the Rockets. Phase 2.5, phase 3. What phase is Tillman going to call this at Media Day? What's he going to call it? What's he going to say?
This is phase 2.5 too. We're still in phase 2, man. We're in 2.
I guess it's got to be phase 2 until you get back to the play-in tournament at least. Like, It should have been phase 2 last year, make the play-in tournament. Then phase 3 would have been, okay, make the playoffs outright this year. So,
well, let's be fair. Phase 1 was 2 seasons, was it not?
It was. You know what? That's fair. All right, so we'll give him 2 seasons for phase 2, and then we'll graduate to phase 3 next year. I think the other thing too is it's very easy to look at a team like the Rockets with so many young, talented players, and obviously we talk so much about how these guys are developing, how they're growing, and we think the world of these guys. We think that every single one of the young core could be a future superstar, all that kind of stuff. If the guys just don't develop, right, if they don't pan out the way we think they do, I think the really big question mark for this team, and we don't have an answer on this yet. I will say, look, Alperen Sengun looks incredible, right? He looks like an all-star caliber player. We still don't know, can he be the number one guy on a true contender? We don't have that answer yet. We know that he can be a great player on at least a 500 team, but we don't know yet if Alperen Sengun can be the best player on a contender. And if the Rockets don't, I don't want to say if they don't answer that question this season, that it's going to result in them regressing, but they're going to need somebody to step up and be that guy. And if it's not Alperen Sengun, then I'm not sure which one of the other guys it's going to be at this point. Obviously, there's a lot of hope for, a guy like a Thompson to potentially turn into that guy. There's still some optimism for Jalen Green to pan out and turn into that guy if he can get more consistent with his game. But if the Rockets don't have a guy take that leap this season, then that could be the recipe for some regression here. Yeah.
And I think also I'd add to that, what if these guys come out and they just incrementally improve? Everybody but slow increments. They don't take real leaps forward, and we have a bunch of 4th and 5th starter level players, next year. I mean, that's a recipe for a very average or below average team that doesn't perform as well. And what if there's just too many mouths to feed, which causes some unrest within the locker room? Right. And guys begin to not play with one another and trust one another and start to go out and try and earn those new contracts that a lot of them are up for. Right. They're unsatisfied by how the first 20 games went. And then, MA kind of begins to lose the locker room. Those are the things that are like dangerous for really deep teams and really young teams. I don't think any of that stuff would happen. Right. But I think those are the types of things that could drag the Rockets down outside of injury.
Yeah, those are definitely some realistic kind of worst case outcomes for this team. I'll bring up one more here, and it's clear as day. It's the 3-point shooting. We talked about, I highlighted it in segment 1, right? They're going to have to become better offensively for them to overachieve. But if the 3-point shooting somehow gets worse, right? Like if they haven't worked on it, if the team does not find ways to improve in that regard, or again, if they actively regress as a 3-point shooting team, then the offense isn't going to move forward. They were 20th in the NBA last season in offensive efficiency. So top 10 defensive actually, I think they finished exactly at 10th, right? So 10th best team in the NBA defensively, 20th in offense. If they get even worse than 20th in offense, that's going to also lead into what you talked about, right? The crunch time execution, right? In the clutch, all that stuff. And I could see them dropping a lot of games because of that. And I could see them really faltering and not being able to get past a lot of opponents. Because yes, your defense is what keeps you in games. Your defense is what makes you competitive on a night-to-night basis. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to put the ball in the bucket. And the Rockets have a couple guys who can do that, but they don't have, I think, one guy that can do it kind of on command, right? Like even as talented and as good as Alperen Sengun is, he hasn't shown to be like your guaranteed bucket when you need one at the end of a game, right? And some of that is because he's a big and like he needs somebody to set him up. He needs, a pick and roll partner, whatever, and that's just, the nature of the beast when you're a big man like that. So hopefully that's something that he's worked on this year where he can be that go-to guy in crunch time, or maybe Jalen Green's ready to be that guy. And hell, Jabari Smith Jr. is another candidate, right? We know Jabari has that in him, right? The cold-bloodedness. He's hit so many big shots in his short career already. Maybe he's that guy. But the Rockets need the 3-point shooting, and they also need a go-to guy late in games to be able to win some of those close ones.
Yeah.
Coming up, we want to get into the final outcome here for the Rockets, and that's the one where things happen kind of as expected, right? This team clocks in around 44 wins or so. What would need to happen for that to be the outcome for the Rockets this next season? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes you lose that childhood curiosity, right? Maybe there's something that you'd like to learn a little bit more about. It could be gardening, it could be a new language, or maybe it's how to beat your best friend at pickup down at the park, right? Look, therapy can help you reconnect with your childhood sense of wonder because your back to school era can come at any age. Look, I've done therapy in the past, and I found it to be an incredibly cathartic experience to have an unbiased professional third party kind of walk me through some of the stuff that I was dealing with in my day-to-day life. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, our final possible outcome for the Houston Rockets here, Madison. And that's the one where everything kind of stays, I don't want to say stays status quo, because as we kind of set our barometer at the beginning of this episode, we said 44 wins would be the expected outcome for this team, which would still be a marginal improvement from where they were last season at 41 wins. But realistically, you're looking at, if we say 44 wins, right? We can look at the playoff race last season. The 10th seed Golden State Warriors had 46 wins, right? So is 44, I think the first question is 44 wins, do we think that's going to be enough to make the playoffs in the Western Conference? I will say it might be, if only because I'm expecting all the teams in the Western Conference to have less wins this season than they did last year, because I'm expecting the West to be wholly more competitive this season, with San Antonio getting better, with the Grizzlies being good again, with the Rockets taking a step forward, hopefully. But is 44 going to be enough to be at least in the play-in discussion? It might be, but it could also be on the precipice.
Man, I really hope so. I mean, if you can't make the 10 seed with going 3 games over 500, like, that's insane. I mean, to me, I think it's good for the NBA, and that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, I think if the Rockets get to around 44 to 45 wins, they should be able to squeak into the 10th win. Although the West has gotten more competitive, I think some of the teams at the top have for sure weakened. I think the Warriors are not the same team. I think the Clippers are not the same team. And I think there's wins to be had in those situations, especially teams like the Lakers had extremely good health last year. I don't expect that to continue, especially with Anthony Davis. I think that there'll be a team or two that naturally migrates to the bottom due to injuries or just due to unforeseen circumstances. And I think by that, the Rockets will be able to get in with 44 to 45 wins.
I know I made a whole spiel earlier about talking about injuries, but I do think it's important in this segment talking about like kind of the as expected outcome to say, assuming the Rockets don't have any injuries, they should probably be in this range. I mean, we can look at just last season and say, man, if Tari Eason didn't get hurt, Tari Eason by himself is probably good for 2 or 3 extra wins throughout the season, right? And that would have put the Rockets closer to that final 10th seed in the playoff spot. So I think health is something to consider when you look at this, kind of, status quo outcome, if you will. But what else are you looking at for this Rockets team to kind of go as expected this upcoming season, to hit that 44 win mark?
So as expected, I expect the guys to take a step, not a huge step forward, but a step indeed. I like to look at that step as a similar step that Jabari took from his rookie season to last year, right? Where he just improved his efficiency across the board, became better defensively, knew where he was supposed to be, and became a pretty good release valve. Now, if Jabari can take a similar size step from where he was at the end of last season, we're looking at a guy with 18, who averages 18 points a game on 38% from three and is a better defender, is a stronger defender. You know what I mean? And if 5 to 6 of those guys on our team take those types of steps forwards, right? You go from a player that contributes to winning to a high level player that contributes to winning, like very impactful, on both sides of the floor, and just incrementally get better as shooters, as a collective. I think that will really help this offense. Like you said, offense is a big issue for the Rockets, and 3-point shooting is a big issue. So if everybody, can raise, if we have 2 or 3 players who raise their 3-point percentages by 2 to 3%, that would be huge for the spacing of the Rockets in this offense. Those are the type of incremental improvements that young players make all the time. And that's what I expect to see that these young guys come out and do.
One other major kind of expectation for this team, to me at least, is, they're not going to go through all the learning that they had to go through last year, right? When you come in with a new head coach and a new coaching staff and a group that, especially because look, you can do new head coach, new coaching staff with a veteran team and they'll pick things up a lot quicker because they're veterans. This was a twofold operation where it was new head coach, new coaching staff, and they had an insanely young team on top of that. All these guys were learning things for the first time, understanding concepts and principles for the first time. So you erase all of that, right? And so I think the expectation for this team is to come in and they shouldn't have to, there shouldn't be anything remedial going on, right? Ime's not going to have to break things down and teach new terminology. They are familiar with everybody now. And again, you look, there was a graphic, right, circling around the other day about teams that are bringing back the same players from last season. And the Rockets, I believe, were the only team to bring back 15 guys from the previous season. And I think the Rockets had the most on that list of just no change whatsoever. The only guy who's coming into this season that is new is Reed Shepherd.
Steven Adams is not.
Oh, sorry. Well, my bad. Technically, Steven Adams is new as well. I apologize because he was with the team last year. All right, you're right. So 2 new guys who are going to be parts of the rotation. But at the end of the day, those 2 guys, I think Reed's a little bit different. Steven Adams can slot it, and he's a vet, right? He understands what he's got to do. He's going to understand his role. Not really worried about him adjusting. The Reed is definitely going to have some moments where he looks like a rookie. I want Rockets fans to be ready for that. Don't put too much pressure on the kid right out of the gate. Yes, he had a strong summer league. Yes, he looked really good. But there's also a lot of pressure on him to be drafted into a situation where the Rockets want to make the playoffs, right? They want to be a winning team. And he's going to have a lot of, responsibility being the backup guard behind Fred VanVleet. That's what we're expecting from him. We're expecting him to get those, 12 to 15 minutes a night backing up Fred, and potentially even more than that if he's better right out of the gate than we think he's going to be. But to me, I mean, as far as, outcomes, I would still consider, this is a real question, is if they are at 44 wins, and we'll say 44 wins, and we'll say crazy Western Conference, we'll say 44 wins is good enough for the 10th seed. All right, we'll just put them right at 10. Is that a disappointment of a season, or is that still a successful season, given where they finished this last year, where they were like a hair away from making it to the play-in?
I think it'll be successful if the young Rockets lead this charge. I feel like the veterans, did a lot of compensating for the young players' mistakes early in the season.
Yeah, they were like the training wheels.
Right. The training wheels. You know what I mean? And by the end of the season, the young players were really leading probably 80% of the charge. But in the beginning of the season, it seemed more like 50 or, 60-40 going the vets' way, with Fred VanVleet running all the pick and rolls, initiating most of the offense, him and Sengun, right? And if that can switch to the way it was, post All-Star break, where Jalen and your young players become the initiators of everything. If we can drive Fred VanVleet's numbers down, right? Not numbers, minutes, down, like you said, with great play from these young guys.
Drive Fred VanVleet's numbers down. Man, are we back in the worst case segment? What are we doing?
No. Drive his minutes down. It's not necessary. He doesn't need to, be on the floor every second for us to get efficient offense.
Again. Man,
exactly.
He did that at one point last season. That's crazy
what I'm saying. He plays so many minutes, and he really got us organized and you know what I mean? And I think it'll be a significant step forward for the young Rockets to say, hey, Fred, you're doing great. You're doing your job, but we don't necessarily need you as to hold us up so much anymore. And I think if you do that and get into the play-in, and you do it on probably 80% of the young guys, the young core leading that charge, initiating the offense, really learning how to close games, then I think that will be a huge success for the team.
50 wins, 38 wins, 44 wins. If I put those all on, 3 separate doors, which door are you walking through, Madison? Which one's happening?
We're going through the 50-win door, man.
I love it. I'm with it. 50 wins.
Let's do it. 50. It's for me, man, I don't know if there's some One Piece fans in there, but in here, in our fandom, man. We're getting there. We're getting there. But, man, Shank says something about a young pirate. He said, you'd be surprised how fast young pirates grow up. And that's how I feel about the Rockets, man. You'd be surprised how much better young guys take leaps, right? And I feel like we're in this perfect window for multiple of our young players to take significant leaps and kind of catapult themselves into a different tier of player. And that's why I'm looking forward to getting that 2 or 3 all-star level players. I'm looking forward to getting one, top 10 player or top 15 player. Jalen and Alp are knocking on that door if they can get there. If Jalen can get his consistency better and Alp can just get a little bit better at other things that he has in his skill set. I mean, we got guys who can get there. We got other guys who can reach those all-star levels like Jabari Smith Jr. I think he's in for a developmental surge. Amon Thompson's an older second-year player. He's already showed that he can contribute. Now he's getting bigger and stronger, right? Like, we have the pieces that are primed for this developmental shift in this leap forward. And I think these young guys can do it.
And I'm looking forward to more anime references that I only slightly understand on the show. Nah, you get it. Look, it's going to be a niche reference where we cross like sports fandom and anime fandom, and like
maybe
a handful of people are going to be like, yeah, let's go. All right, but on that note, what's going to happen this next season? Are we getting the 50-win Rockets, the 38-win Rockets, or the 44-win Rockets? Let us know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Madison, you know the drill. Let me know where to track you down at.
You can find me at MadmanLeaks on Twitter. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Quick couple shout outs here at the end of the show. Shout out to my guy Jonathan. Got me looking fresh and clean ahead of the Rockets season, as well as my guy Anthony. It was a ton of fun talking about the best centers of all time at the shop the other day. Appreciate you for tuning into the shows, all that good stuff. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.